Thank you. The first question I ask is not always an easy question, but it's how long do you plan on being alive? See, I ask that question because when I do longevity talks, invariably the audience will split themselves mentally into two groups. And the first group is people who think that they're actually too old to be at a longevity talk, that life has led them the way it has, circumstances that they've gotten what they've gotten. The first question I ask them is, since you do not know exactly how long you're going to be around, how about we make these next years, these next decades even better? And people go, yeah, let's do that. Because the other group of people are people who actually think they're too young to be at a longevity talk. That longevity talks are for the other group, that's for old people. Well, for that group, I ask a very simple question also. Is when do you start being concerned about the rose bush? When it's fully formed, or when you put the seed into the dirt? Exactly. So let's talk about some numbers when it comes to longevity. And we're going to talk about 25, we're going to talk about 75, and 315,000. Well, the 25 is the percentage of adults in America who do not move, who do not exercise. Well, we can think that number will have absolutely detrimental consequences downstream, not only for them, but for American healthcare. The 75. The 75 is the percentage of school-age children in America who do not meet the required recommendations for PE. We are teaching a generation not to move. If the fish weren't swimming, the birds weren't flying, and the deer weren't running, we would think we'd have a catastrophe on our hands. We cannot think that number won't have absolutely detrimental consequences downstream, not only for them, but for American healthcare. Because we get to the 315,000. The 315,000 is the amount of monies you as a couple would need in retirement for your health care costs, out of pocket, after what Medicare has put in. We need to find a way to decrease that number. We need to find a way to not be dependent upon that. We need to find a way that we can, if it's there, we use it for other reasons, like additions on a house, or travel, or giving it to kids. Well, this is the bad news when it comes to longevity. If you've been to one of my talks, you know that I wouldn't tell you bad news without giving you a solution. I wouldn't tell you the house is on fire without saying, this is the way we gotta go. So let's talk about five things that are reasonable, effective, and cost-effective. Reasonable, effective, and cost-effective that can help us to be more independent and change the way we use that money. And so the first thing we're going to do is more motion. Number one is motion. What do these two groups have in common? It's that they don't move nearly enough. The magic number is 150 minutes per week. 150 minutes per week of motion. Monday through Friday, 30 minutes, you get the weekends off. Very simple. Very simple. Number two is going to be rocket fuel. We're not talking about diets, not talking about nutritional programs, we're talking about rocket fuel. What do the people who live the longest or most active on Earth eat? Well, they're plant-forward eaters. What's the strange thing about this is that the animal products that were grown on farms are now being produced in labs. Rocket fuel. Number three, great sleep. Great sleep. The sleep, perchance a dream. Oh. The strange thing about sleep is that when we have little ones, we have the babies, we have infants, we are steadfast about their sleep. The kids have to be asleep by that time, in bed by this time. We don't mess around with them. It's rock solid. Shh, the baby's asleep. But as adults, we try to stay up even longer to watch the end of that game, although we can watch it 14 different ways the next morning. Or we try to find out what happened to that dead body 30 years ago. Sleep. Number four is some way of taking your brain, putting it over there for a while with mental rest and focus. My favorite way is meditation. Maybe you're someone who prays or someone who takes walks out in nature like my wife loves, or instrumental music. Mental rest and focus. The fifth way is optimized nervous system. Not a good nervous system, an optimized nervous system. How can we get you as close to this posture for as long as possible? If I buy a computer, I want the computer to run great. So when I add in these other apps, that they run the best also. The most reasonable, effective, and cost-effective way to get you to have a better nervous system is get you to be up to this position as much as possible. When I started practicing like 30 years ago, I remember distinctly, it was Mrs. Johansson, an 82-year-old woman from Sweden. She was the one in my practice built like this. When I go to the schools, elementary schools, that do the scoliosis checks, and scoliosis is the curve from this way. When I go to the schools to do that, it's right around 3.2% of girls and 2.8% of boys who have a scoliosis. What percentage do you think of the kids are now built like this? It's at levels now. It's astronomical. We need to get them, you and I, built like this as well as possible. Reasonable, effective, cost-effective things. Reasonable, effective, cost-effective things we do on a regular basis. If you were to Google up the population of America and then divide that by the amount of prescriptions that are filled in America in a given year, you would find that you, and you, we as Americans have almost 15 prescriptions a year filled. Almost 15. That number has gone up. As that number goes up, our independence goes down. As that number goes up, this number over here goes up higher. Because there are two people in your future. There are two people in your future and they look just like you. And maybe it's at your granddaughter's wedding. And one of the people who looks just like you is in the back saying, I'm going to get the first dance, the second dance, the third dance, the fourth dance. I'm going to get all the dances. We love that person. We love that person because they're alive, they're energetic, and they're independent. Because there's the other person who looks just like you, and they aren't any of those. My question to you is this. Which one do you want to be? Which one of those do you want to be? Yeah, I know. So how can we stack the deck on a daily basis? How can we stack the deck on a regular basis to make sure we're much more like that person? How can we stack the deck on a regular basis to make sure that we decrease the need for those monies? They're no longer needed for co-payments and doctor calls. We do these 5 things on a regular basis. We increase our independence. We decrease our need for those monies. We get to be like that person more often. Reasonable, effective, cost-effective things. We do them on a regular basis, and we are rewarded. We're rewarded with greater independence. I appreciate your time.